Hey guys, so I have been uh, trying to work out how to get through this massive document, which is Lively's opposition to Wayfarer's motion in limine. Now, Wayfarer, I went through their document. It was quite a big document. They have 19 motions in limine. I think their actual motion in limine document, was something like 50 plus pages in itself. This is over 100 pages, the opposition. So I was like, how am I going to do this without making it a ridiculously long, drawn out video? And what I've decided to do is to do a separate video for each motion in limine, which will then make it short enough then that it's not, obviously not long winded, but also give me a buffer then, so there's time to talk about things and give my opinions on things without dragging it all out and turning it into a long video. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to start here now with motion limine number 1. So this is obviously the evidence of alleged bad experiences from 7 other women, which in my opinion is hearsay. None of them saw, with the exception of Jenny Slate, who saw one incident. None of them saw any of Lively's alleged harassment. And I mean, what they're saying, well, it's evidence that, we had a bad experience with Baldoni too, but I just think their bad experiences are that they didn't consider them bad experiences until they had a conversation with Lively, and Lively appears to have conveniently pointed out that, oh, that's you shouldn't have done that. Oh, that's abuse, that's harassment. We'll go through her opposition and we'll just kind of see what she has to say. I haven't actually read this yet, so I'm interested to see what her arguments are for it. Okay. Plaintiff Blake Lively hereby responds to defendant's motion in limine. For the reasons that follow, Lively respectfully requests that defendant's motions be denied in their entirety. Opposition to defendant's motion in limine number 1 to preclude evidence of the alleged bad experiences of other women. Defendants seek to exclude testimony from 7 women with direct knowledge of Baldoni and Heath's conduct, not because it is irrelevant, but because it is powerful. No, they don't have direct knowledge. That's just it. Again, aside from Jenny Slate, for one incident, no, there is no direct knowledge. Their motion rests on the false premise that this evidence is not relevant to Lively's retaliation claims, but it plainly is. What? The challenge testimony is central to all of 1. Lively's subjective and objective belief that Baldoni's and Heath's conduct was unlawful, an essential element of her claim. 2. Defendant's false narrative that Lively orchestrated others on the film to turn against Baldoni, thereby justifying defendant's smear campaign as a reasonable defensive measure. And 3. The collateral effects of that retaliatory campaign on other women associated with the film. The collateral effects of the What collateral effect have they suffered? I don't understand. Excluding this testimony would allow defendants to offer unchallenged, self-serving testimony at trial about the events that prompted the entire cast to decline to appear alongside Baldoni at the film's premiere, as well as cause Lively and others to complain directly to Wayfarer's leadership. The law does not permit defendants to exclude evidence that directly refutes the defendants intend to introduce, or evidence that directly supports Lively's claims. Defendants mischaracterize the evidence at issue. Defendants begin from a distorted and incomplete account of the testimony they seek to exclude by selectively minimizing, fragmenting, and at times misstating that testimony They attempt to repackage highly probative, corroborating evidence as a collection of isolated and insignificant other bad acts. That is simply wrong. Jenny Slate is an eyewitness who experienced sexually harassing and gendered conduct from Baldoni and Heath on set. Conduct Lively personally observed and discussed with Slate during filming, in addition to Lively's own experiences. Slate independently decided not to promote the film with Baldoni or Heath based on how she had been treated, and she shared that decision with her own team as early as June 2023, well before the period defendants now attribute to Lively's supposed influence. Slate was also one of many women on the cast who experienced collateral online hate in the wake of defendants' retaliatory campaign against Lively. Isabella Ferrer likewise experienced inappropriate and sexualized comments from Baldoni on set, including statements such as, "I'm not supposed to say this, but that was hot," immediately after an intimate scene depicting an underage character losing her virginity, as well as comments that sexualized her to her co-star. Ferrer independently chose to distance herself from Baldoni, including electing not to appear with him in promotion. She also has first-hand knowledge of the public hate and hostility resulting from defendants' retaliatory smear campaign and how that backlash collaterally affected herself and other women associated with the film, also disproving the narrative that Lively's allegedly tone-deaf marketing was the cause of an organic backlash against her. There's a footnote here. Defendants do not identify what they specifically seek to exclude or whether they seek to exclude all evidence related to Slate, Ferrer, Sachs, Hall, Plank, Hoover, or Ayub. The motion should be denied for this reason. Okay. Defendants similarly reduce Alex Sachs's testimony to a few instances where Baldoni yelled while under stress. This interpretation mischaracterizes and artificially narrows Sachs's testimony, which is far broader. She confirmed that she never observed Baldoni treating men the way he treated her. That doesn't mean he didn't. And she wasn't yelled at because she was a woman. I don't like shit like that. If your boss kind of reprimands you, then, but which is all that's happened here, by the way, then, you cannot sit there and go, well, I didn't see him do it to the men, so therefore the only conclusion is that, he did it because I'm a woman. That's bullshit. Early on, Sachs developed concerns about the absence of any meaningful HR structure on set and the obvious problem that Baldoni and Heath were the only people to whom complaints could be directed, even complaints about their own conduct. She recommended that Wayfarer investigate concerns on set, which it refused to do, and she concluded that Baldoni should be removed as director and that Heath should not be allowed on set. Yeah, because she wanted Heath's job and she wanted Baldoni removed so that Christy Hall could take over. The fact that she has come to a conclusion that she doesn't want men in the cast sounds more gendered than the suggestion that Baldoni yelled at her and because she's a woman, purely on the basis that based on her experiences on the film, Sachs also concluded that she would not work with Baldoni or Heath again, though she would work with Lively, of course she would, and did not want to attend the premiere with them. It ends with us. Writer Christy Hall's role is likewise not irrelevant or attenuated. Hall told Sachs that Baldoni did not respect her as a female voice, that she did not want to be associated or do press with him because of his dismissive behaviour. Hall's complaints informed Sachs's understanding of Baldoni's conduct and contributed to Sachs's independent conclusion that his behaviour was serious enough to warrant. Colleen Hoover also had far more involvement than defendants suggest. Yeah, because Lively brought her in. She did not merely express dissatisfaction with her role in production. Hoover worked closely with Lively. It was not Sony's cut. And developed her own independent concerns regarding Baldoni's conduct and editorial decisions. She felt marginalised and exploited by Baldoni, and after witnessing Baldoni and Heath disparage Lively in May 2024, chose to distance herself from them permanently. Hoover also did not appear publicly with Baldoni or Heath, and like other women associated with the film, experienced substantial public backlash resulting from defendants' online smear campaign and Baldoni's unilateral shift in the film's messaging despite following Wayfarer and Sony's approved marketing plans. I hate to point this out, right, but the messages and that long email she sent to Josh Greenstein, Colleen Hoover now, completely contradict all of that. It was, well, Blake's not happy, so, I'm gonna support her, blah, blah, blah. And Colleen Hoover admitted that she unfollowed Justin Baldoni at Blake's request. So the evidence does not support that. And to be honest, she sold the rights to adapt the film, right? To adapt her book into a film. She is not entitled to further involvement at that point, okay? And I'm sure it was calculated of Lively to have brought her in to keep her on board, to make her feel part of it, especially specifically for this purpose now. So now she can say, well, Justin Baldoni kept Colleen Hoover out of all of this, but I included her in everything. But it's not within Colleen Hoover's gift to be included in all of this stuff. And it's not true either, because there were text messages as well where, Justin Baldoni paid something like $19,000 to redesign the heart thing, so that it matched the tattoo, because that was deeply personal to Colleen Hoover. So to say that Justin Baldoni did not involve her is just absolute bullshit. Claire Ayub, writer and director of Empire Waste, another film produced by Baldoni and Wayfarer during the same period, had similar experiences with Baldoni on her own set. No, this was a year before It Ends With Us. It was in 2022. Ayub declared under oath that Baldoni was verbally abusive toward her, prompting him to bar her from set and refused to do press with him in August 2024. She was also a percipient witness to statements by surrogates threatening to target Lively and her husband, which plainly bear on Wayfarer and It Ended With Us movies' retaliatory motive. That's bullshit. Oh my god, the lies. He did not threaten to target Lively and her husband. He threatened to defend his studio. Finally, Liz Plank. Oh, fucking hell. Liz Plank's testimony will not be based on vague or unspecified concerns. Liz Plank never raised concerns with Baldoni and Heath during the years that she was a co-host of the podcast. Plank warned Lively about Baldoni before filming, describing her own experience working with him as one of the worst days of her life. One of the worst. She worked with him for several days, years, informing Lively's subjective belief that Wayfarer and Ainsworth's movie treated women differently than men at work. Lively discussed her experiences with Plank contemporaneously, describing set as HR nuts. Defendants' attempt to reduce this evidence to a collection of trivial or unrelated other bad acts ignores both its substance and its significance. The evidence is essential to establishing Lively's reasonable belief. As this court has already recognized, there is no underlying FEHA violation. Where no underlying FEHA violation has been found, the question is the reasonableness of the plaintiff's belief that she was opposing a practice prohibited by FEHA. Defendant's contention that existence of sex-based discriminatory motive is no longer an issue, outright ignores Lively's burden on retaliation. I mean, she does make a point. I do understand she does make a point. But the fact that other people had issues, which I mean, Colleen Hoover can't claim that it was because of her sex that she was kept out of the editing room because she never had a right to go into the editing room. She was the book's author. She was not a producer or an editor. And it was not part of the agreement either. Lively still must show that both she had subjectively Lively still must show both that she subjectively believed she was opposing unlawful conduct and that her belief was objectively reasonable. The challenged evidence is essential to do so. Slate and Plank support Lively's subjective belief. Plank and Slate's testimony directly supports Lively's subjective state of mind. Plank warned Lively about Baldoni before production, and Lively reported her experiences to Plank contemporaneously as events unfolded. Now, I think it still stinks of a setup. This evidence goes directly to what Lively knew, experienced, and understood about the conduct she was opposing. Likewise, Baldoni's comment to Slate, I can say this because my wife is here, but you look sexy in what you're wearing, and similar conduct that Slate and Lively discussed in real time, support Lively's good faith belief that defendants were engaging in unlawful conduct. But she also said that, I mean, Jenny Slate was fine to talk about stuff like this, and she said, oh, it's okay, there's safety with women doing it. So she was applying a gender-based limitation, i.e., it was okay for Slate or Lively to say the same comments, but if Justin Baldoni even just nodded his head in agreement, then he was being a creep and a pervert because he's a man. As opposed to simply just engaging with a conversation that was taking place in his presence. And that's what the text messages show happened. Slate and Lively frequently communicated about how disturbed they were by Baldoni and Heath's behaviour. Slate also independently reported her concerns about Baldoni and Heath's conduct to Sachs, concerns shared with Wayfarer that it refused to investigate. We didn't refuse to. You didn't ask. Slate also, by the way, said that everything was fine. She accepted the apology and felt that they'd adequately addressed their concerns. So is Lively being unreasonable here? Yes. In addition, Slate personally observed Baldoni's conduct toward Lively, perceived it to be inappropriate, confronted Baldoni about it, and has spoken to Baldoni's callous reaction to the same. All facts which support Lively's belief and defendants' retaliatory animus. Defendants' effort to dismiss this evidence as stray remarks is meritless. The California Supreme Court expressly rejected the rigid federal stray remarks doctrine in the FIHA context. In Reed, the court held that earlier comments made outside an employment decision or by non-decision makers may still be circumstantial evidence of discriminatory animus. The court cautioned against categorically excluding such evidence, holding that its significance depends on context, including who made the remarks, when they were made, and how they relate to other evidence. Thus, even the remarks when they were made and how they relate to thus even remarks that are not independently actionable may corroborate other evidence, illuminate patterns of behavior, and gain significance when viewed in context. That principle applies here, and defendants improperly isolate Baldoni's comments to Slate from the broader record. Whether Baldoni's comments to Slate are on their own actionable as harassment is of no moment. A workplace must be viewed in its totality. Considered alongside testimony from multiple women describing similar conduct and its effects, those statements are not meaningless stray remarks, but part of a pattern of gendered behavior that bears directly on defendants' credibility, their asserted justifications, and the reasonableness of Lively's belief. This court has already found that Baldoni's comments about Slate's physical appearance could support a finding that Lively reasonably believed she was opposing an unlawful environment. Yes, and the court also said that what he said to Isabella Ferrer would not, because he said it to both a man and a woman. Okay. Other women's experiences support objective reasonableness. The experiences of the other women, including Sachs, Hall, Farah, and Ayub, are equally important to establishing Lively's credibility as well as the objective reasonableness of her concerns. To understand the insidious and gendered nature of Baldoni's and Heath's conduct, the jury must hear from the women themselves about what they experienced and why it was problematic. How women in this workplace and other Wayfarer workplaces view Baldoni and Heath's behaviour is directly relevant to Baldoni and Heath's, and by extension, Wayfarers and It Ends With Us movies' discriminatory mental state. Defendants argue that these experiences are too dissimilar from Lively's to matter. The law does not impose a bright line rule excluding Me Too evidence. Rather, admissibility turns on how closely the evidence relates to the plaintiff's circumstances and theory. Me Too? Really? Here, the overlap between Lively's case and the testimony of other women is substantial. These women interacted with the same individuals in closely related contexts, each in a work environment overseen by Wayfarer, Baldoni, and Heath, during the same time and experienced gendered conduct they independently perceived as harmful. Sachs's testimony regarding Baldoni's conduct, the lack of HR protocols on set, Heath's role as the sole reporting avenue, and Wayfarer's refusal to investigate concerns about sex-based behaviours because Heath believed that it would be better not to have a written record, demonstrates a workplace structure that a reasonable person could view as hostile to reporting and inherently suspect. Indeed, Sachs's testimony regarding Wayfarer's failure to investigate concerns is directly relevant to both retaliatory animus and punitive damages. Defendants' assertion that Sachs's testimony cannot show gender-based animus because an environment equally harsh for men and women is not actionable ignores Sachs's testimony that she never saw Baldoni treat male individuals the same way, and that an employer may create a hostile work environment because it feels important or powerful where humiliating women. Oh, for fuck's sake. Any mini trial about this incident would be brief. There is no evidence that Baldoni yelled at, diminished, or failed to investigate a complaint raised by any male in connection with the film. Farah will also testify to Baldoni's sexualized comments toward her. That the comments were made in the presence of a male co-star misses the point. The comments sexualized Farah, and she perceived them as such. No, she did not. At the time, she did not. That they were uttered to or around others does not neutralize their gendered content. Ayub provides additional independent confirmation. She worked on a different Wayfarer-produced film, but independently decided not to appear impressed with Baldoni, reinforcing that concerns about Baldoni's conduct were not unique to Lively. Ayub's testimony also underscores that Baldoni had previously had others refuse to promote a Wayfarer film alongside him, but did not retaliate. The difference here was that Lively's sexual harassment claims threatened to shatter Baldoni's curated feminist image. Any differences among the women's experiences go to weight, not admissibility. In the FIHA context, the similarities between the facts related in the other's employee's declarations and the facts asserted by the plaintiff with regard to her own case go to the weight of the evidence, not its admissibility. The evidence is relevant to rebut defendants' defenses. California law squarely rejects defendants' contention that evidence of other women's experiences is irrelevant or inadmissible simply because those incidents did not occur in plaintiff's presence or were not known to her at the time. To the contrary, Me Too evidence, testimony from other employees or individuals who experienced similar conduct may be admissible in the FIHA context, even where the conduct occurred outside the plaintiff's presence and outside the period of her employment. Well, okay. Such evidence is expressly relevant to demonstrate motive, intent, knowledge, and absence of mistake, to rebut a defendant's proper justifications and factual claims, and to impeach credibility. Courts have consistently recognized that this type of evidence is particularly probative where, as here, defendants advance a narrative that their actions were legitimate or undertaken in good faith in that circumstance. Evidence from others similarly situated may directly undermine that defense and test the credibility of the defendant's asserted explanations. I'm telling you now, right? Alex Sachs gets on the stand, they're going to pull out the Florida Project and her opportunistic move to take over the production company of her fellow co-producer, who a male who was accused of sexual harassment, and he was cleared of it. But in the midst of all that, she sat on it, didn't say anything, and then basically come out with this speech of, I've taken action. I now have sole control of, June Productions, which was the production company that she took from this man. So I don't think, this is what annoys me, right? Is Alex Sachs is going to say, well, he yelled at me. Okay. Now it might be that he's just, a guy with an extraordinarily long amount of patience, right? Never ending patience. But someone will do that. There will be something that will tip him over the edge. And Alex Sachs just happened to be the person that pushed him over the edge. That one, on that occasion. We don't really know, right? He was also dealing with the stress of Lively, who was being a pain in the ass immediately. So to say, well, my male boss yelled at me and I didn't see him, not that it didn't happen, but that she didn't see him yell at any other male members of the crew. Like, I have seen text messages where Baldoni is getting a bit, irate with Jamie Heath over the film by credit, and then the next day Baldoni's coming back and going, yeah, look, I've calmed down, I've slept, I'm sorry. So to say that there was no other there was no male member of staff who did not kind of, get a bit of Baldoni's venting is not actually true. It's not true, because there are text messages where he actually, kind of lets Heath have a bit of it as well. The fact that Alex Sachs didn't see that, though, is irrelevant. What she's saying is, well, he shouted at me, and I didn't see him shout at any other men. And the question from Wayfarer's team will be, okay, but could he have, yelled at a male? Could he have raised his voice? And Alex Sachs is going to have to say, well, yeah, it's possible. And then that'll be the end of her testimony. It's like, okay, well, what did that actually add for Lively? Nothing. Nothing. And that's just one example. But let's continue. Here, one of defendant's central narratives is that Lively orchestrated a coordinated effort to alienate Baldoni, persuading others to unfollow him. She did. Colleen Hoover, who admits that. Refused to promote the film with him and exclude him from the premiere. Defendants use this theory to both attack Lively's credibility and to justify their retaliatory conduct as reasonable defenses against an alleged reputational attack. The testimony defendants seek to exclude is a direct and compelling rebuttal to that narrative. The women at issue have testified that they have decided not to promote the film or be associated with Lively based on their own experiences and concerns, not on any direction from Lively. More than that, their testimony shows that Baldoni and Heath alienated themselves. In other words, that their own actions, rather than anything Lively did, created the PR crisis allegedly underpinning their so-called defensive measures. Slate and Ferrer will testify that they made their own Slate and Ferrer will testify that they made their own decisions regarding social media and promotional participation based on their personal experiences with Lively. Yes, they all happened to just make the same decision at the same time based on experiences that had taken place over a year beforehand. Got it. Hoover will testify that after Baldoni and Heath openly disparaged Lively to her, she independently chose never to speak to Heath or Baldoni again. Sachs will testify that she believed Baldoni should be replaced as director, that Heath should not be allowed on set, and that she would not work with either of them again. Hall similarly chose to distance herself from Baldoni based on his conduct toward her. And Ayub, working on another Wayfarer production at the time, had such serious concerns about Baldoni that she barred him from her set. Her set? Her set? And refused to do press with him. That pattern of independent decisions by multiple women across different contexts, all concerning Wayfarer, Into's movie, Baldoni and or Heath's workplace conduct, and without coordination, undermines defendant's narrative at its core. It was not Lively who turned others against Baldoni. Baldoni and Heath's own conduct led multiple women to reach similar conclusions on their own. Excluding that testimony would leave the jury with a misleading and one-sided account. It's also important to remember that all of these people, all of these women, except for Colleen Hoover, who should have had no role in all of this, Alex Sachs, Christy Hall, Blake Lively, we already know, Isabella Ferrer, Jenny Slate, Claire Ayub. I think I've got them all. They all, not one of them could have actually brought a claim for any sexual harassment anyway, because they're all independent contractors. The same evidence also rebuts defendant's separate claim that Lively fabricated or leveraged sexual harassment allegations to seize control of the film. Apart from the testimony and documents described above, Hoover had her own independent concerns about Baldoni, including his editorial decisions. Right, so what are we saying here then? He wasn't taking the film in the direction that she wanted, so that's the crux of Hoover's concerns? And she worked collaboratively with Lively on an edit of the film that Hoover believed was more faithful to the source material. It was not. Oh my god, it was not. And do you know what I find wild, right? I'm gonna say this. I think everyone's overlooking the obvious, right? Two of these actresses have both said that there are specific scenes they were asked to act out that they felt was sexualized and, it made them uncomfortable, right? Lively with the birth scene, and then Isabella Ferrer with the licking the cookie dough off the spoon thing, right? Lively edited the film and kept those scenes in. They made these actresses so uncomfortable that Lively went ahead and did not cut them or reshoot them. Just food for thought there. Hoover's involvement and her independent criticism of Baldoni demonstrates that Lively's role in the editing process was not the product of coercion or opportunism. It was, but of shared concerns about the direction of the film. It wasn't. In short, the testimony defendants seek to exclude is not peripheral other acts evidence. It goes directly to the truth or falsity of defendants' core defences. Excluding it would insulate those defences from meaningful challenges and present the jury with a distorted record. Nearly finished now. The other female witnesses are also percipient witness to the smear campaign and its effects. The challenge testimony is also independently relevant to the nature and scope of defendants' retaliatory conduct. Defendant's conduct to undermine and attack Lively's credibility extended beyond her and affected other women associated with the film who appeared alongside Lively in press and promotion. Farrer and Hoover will testify that they experienced the collateral effects of defendants' actions, including online backlash and reputational harm. The shift in marketing and narrative surrounding the film, particularly Baldoni's unilateral DV pivot, while designed to harm Lively, also had consequences for other women involved in the production. This evidence shows that defendants' conduct was not narrowly tailored or merely defensive. It had broader, foreseeable consequences that impacted multiple women. Defendants' Rule 404 argument fails. Finally, defendants' Rule 404 argument fails because the evidence is not offered to show that defendants are bad actors. It is offered to establish that the reasonableness of Lively's state of mind, to demonstrate the objective reasonableness of her belief, to rebut defendants' claim that Lively orchestrated opposition to Baldoni, and to challenge defendants' asserted justification that their retaliatory actions were reasonably defensive. The probative value is substantial because the evidence goes directly to the essential elements of Lively's case and defendants' central defense. The risk of undue prejudice is minimal. The challenged evidence is limited to a discrete group of witnesses closely connected to the relevant events. This is not remote or unrelated conduct likely to confuse the jury. It provides necessary context to issues the jury must decide. Any concern about misuse can be addressed through a limiting instruction. Defendants' mini-trials arguments likewise does not justify blanket exclusion. If accepted, that rationale would exclude nearly all other acts evidence, no matter how closely related to plaintiff's theory. That is not the law. Okay, so that's the end of that. I'm going to do a separate video for each of these motion and eliminate. So I'll do number 2 in the next video. But Lively does make a point, and I do think the judge will let her allow these women to testify. But then that is Wayfarer need to make their kind of arguments and their defenses. They need to bring in the deposition transcripts which contradict, so we'll see how that kind of pans out with Judge Lyman and what he decides on whether he's going to allow this or not. I think Lively's made the case. I don't like it, but I do think Lively's made the case. Yeah. I think the case is ridiculous though. But at the end of the day, it is a fact issue, which is something that gets put before the jury. Okay, so on to the next motion in limine, which is all about the weight comment, which Lively argued, Wayfarer argues is irrelevant because even the judge said, well, that's not sexual harassment. But, we'll see how Lively argues it.